Hi everyone. I want to start today by taking you on a very short journey. When I was 18 and I just finished high school, and I asked myself this question: what is it that I want to do with my life? Now, most of the people who finished high school went straight on to college, but I felt like I had a desire to travel the world and to explore and to find out what it is that I'm really passionate about. So I went and I bought an around-the-world ticket, and I went traveling for 5 months. I went to 6 countries on 3 different continents, and I was just amazed by what I saw. The beautiful natural landscapes, the people that I met, I was in awe. And having grown up in the Netherlands, I was used to being in a very built-up environment with a landscape that is almost 100% dominated by humans and man-made. So I felt like it was important to work on protecting some of the beautiful landscapes and people that we still have on this planet. So I decided to study environmental sciences and conservation, and I dedicated my time and energy over the past decade to learn about environmental issues. Now, initially, my focus was more on the ecological side of things, and for my first master's research I went to South Africa, where I studied herbivory in nutrient hotspots in the African savanna. After that I did another research project, and here I did a greenhouse experiment where I looked at 2 soils from Chile and Peru, and I looked at the feedback effect between these soils and the growth of tree seedlings. After that, my research took me to the Azores, where I studied the diversity and abundance of arthropod species in 4 different landscape types with a different degree of human influence. Now, this was all very fascinating, and I learned a lot from this, but I kind of had this feeling that something was missing, a human dimension. So I realized that I do not just want to work on preserving natural environments, but I'm eager to look for ways in which we can conserve natural landscapes while at the same time offering opportunities for the people within these landscapes to develop and prosper. And this is how I first became interested in agroforestry. And so for my current PhD research, I've looked at tree planting by farmers, and I've carried out this research in Malawi. Now let me tell you a little bit about Malawi. Malawi is a country in the southeastern part of Africa. It is landlocked and bordered by Tanzania, Mozambique and Zambia. Malawi is a very poor country, and most of the population is concentrated in rural areas, with over 75% of the population being subsistence farmers. The most common crop that they grow is maize, which is their staple food. But because population densities are very high in Malawi, the farm sizes are very small, and these lands are being farmed very intensively, and as a result there's problems with soil fertility throughout the country. In addition, Malawi also is suffering from high levels of deforestation. In the past, Malawi was blessed with abundant forests, but over the past decades forest loss has been very rapid, and it's still going on to this day. So for my research, I spent nearly 3 years in Malawi, and I was hosted by the World Agroforestry Center. This is an international research institute that works on research and programs with small-scale farmers on tree planting. When I just got to Malawi, I wanted to know a little bit more about the history of tree planting and the current situation of tree planting. So I did a little bit of research, and I found that there was this dominant narrative in the literature that said that farmers really aren't that interested in planting trees. This stemmed back from the colonial era where mainly colonial forces and estates owned by Europeans were cutting down forests. And then the blame was placed on small-scale farmers, and they were told, you should be planting trees to compensate for this forest loss. Now, as you can imagine, these farmers really weren't that interested in planting trees because they really didn't feel that they were responsible for the deforestation. And they also felt a little bit patronized by these government forces that told them that they should be planting trees. So this is where the problem started. Now that narrative sort of continues till today, and when I got to Malawi, I talked to some of my colleagues at the World Agroforestry Center, I talked to agricultural extension officers, to forestry officials. They kind of told me the same thing, that farmers really aren't taking up tree planting. So I wondered, is this really true? And if so, why? So then what I did is I went out to the field to talk to some of these farmers to see what they have to say. And one of the farmers I met is Grace. Grace lives in a small village in the southern part of Malawi together with her 5 children. And I talked to her a little bit about her experiences with farming and with trees. And she told me, I really love to see trees around. Trees provide shade, shelter from heavy winds, fresh air, and they also beautify the home. So I wondered to myself, do other farmers share these positive views about tree planting? So I decided to study this in more detail and look at farmers' perceptions and attitudes towards trees. Tree planting is not something that's new. People have been known to plant trees around their homes and as part of their farming systems for centuries, even longer than that. And there's examples from this from all over the world. Now in Malawi, I want to show you a few pictures of what those farms look like. There's a wide range of different trees that are being planted on farms. Some of the trees that are very common are fruit trees, such as mango and avocado, but also fast-growing species such as eucalyptus are very popular by farmers. And these trees can be planted around the homes. Sometimes they're planted within the fields or on the boundaries of fields. And sometimes they're planted as separate woodlots. Now, tree planting can have a lot of potential benefits to farmers. Firstly, it can provide fruits, which is important in adding to their diets and improving their nutrition. Trees can also provide fodder that is fed to livestock. Trees can also provide poles, timber, and firewood, and this is particularly important for people in rural areas in Malawi where they rely almost entirely on firewood as their main source of energy. And certain trees can also have a fertilizer effect. Now these trees do this by fixing nitrogen into the soils. The trees that you see in this image are Gliricidia trees. These trees are planted on the fields together with the maize, and studies have shown that maize that is grown together with these trees have higher yields. Now in addition, products from the trees can be sold, and this can improve the income of the farming households. And on top of the benefits to the farmer, there's also important benefits to the environment, as planting trees can also be good for the conservation of biodiversity, and it can also be a way for climate change mitigation by storing carbon. So when I became aware of all these benefits of tree planting, I thought, wow, that's really great. So are farmers not seeing these benefits, or what is going on here? I decided to look at the literature a little bit more closely to see what are some of the variables that are important for farmers when they make decisions in whether or not they want to plant trees. Now, there's a lot of literature out there that looks at what the variables are that affect decisions on whether or not to plant trees. And some of the variables that I commonly came across in my research were things such as the age of the farmer, their gender, their education level, their wealth status, but also variables such as the available land they have to plant trees or the available labor their household has. Environmental characteristics play a role, such as the quality of the soil or the availability of water. There's a lot more variables that I found to be named in the literature. And briefly, I can categorize these into 3 groups: the characteristics of the farmer, the characteristics of the external environment, and the characteristics of the tree planting technology. Now, I would like to call these the extrinsic variables. However, the decision-making process of tree planting is a little bit more complex, and there's other variables that play a role. For example, the knowledge that a farmer has on the trees to plant, on the type of species to plant, where to plant these trees, when to plant them, and how to plant these trees, and this is all very important. Also, the perceptions that farmers have on the costs and the benefits that are associated with tree planting. And finally, their final evaluation or their attitude towards tree planting. Is it good or is it bad to plant trees? So I call these variables the intrinsic variables, and I want to suggest that both type of variables are important if you want to understand tree planting behavior. Now, the literature up to now has really focused on the extrinsic variables. Most of the studies that you read on this topic will look at those type of characteristics that I mentioned. So I want to suggest that we should also start looking at the intrinsic variables, and that is what I've done for my study in Malawi. So what I did is I did a household survey of 200 farmers, and I asked them about the types of trees that they had planted, as well as on their attitudes towards trees. And this is what I found. First of all, farmers had overall positive attitudes towards tree planting. This means that they were aware of the benefits that tree planting can have to them. In addition, they also felt that tree planting is a socially desirable behavior, and they felt encouraged by other people to plant trees. They also felt that they more or less had the ability to plant trees if they wanted to. And finally, when I asked them if they had the intention to plant trees, almost all of the farmers said that they would like to plant trees in the future. Then I asked who is actually planting trees, and I found that in my sample, 75% of the farmers had planted trees on their farm over the past 5 years. Now, there was a wide range in the number of trees that they had planted, ranging from 1 tree in one case up to 528 trees planted by one farmer on their land. So the average number of trees that was planted was around 40 trees per farm, and the median was 22 trees. So when I saw these results, I asked myself, can I really say that farmers in Malawi aren't planting trees? The next thing I did is I wanted to link the attitudes with the behavior, and I found that there was a direct relationship. Farmers who planted trees in the last 5 years had significantly more positive attitudes towards tree planting. And in addition, the more positive the attitudes towards tree planting, the more trees they had planted. So this is a direct relationship. So what this tells me is that the framework I proposed earlier to study the intrinsic variables is important because they directly affect the tree planting behavior. Also, it made me wonder, can we say from this that farmers aren't interested in planting trees? To me, it shows that they are. However, if they are interested, what are some of the barriers that they face with tree planting? What might be some of the reasons that it's not been taken up as much? In order to investigate this further, I did an exercise with groups of farmers where I asked them about their household priorities. I told them, imagine that your household is given a small sum of money in the equivalent of $15, which is quite a lot for the average Malawian farmer. And I asked them, what is the first thing that you will invest this money in? So together we came up with a list of priorities, and after that we did a pairwise ranking exercise to determine which priorities are the most important. I did this with 16 different focus groups with different farmers, and this is what I found. The number one priority for nearly all farmers is to buy food. Most of the farming families cannot produce enough maize of their farm to have enough food for the entire year, so they have to buy more food. The second one is to purchase fertilizer, which is quite expensive in Malawi, but much needed because of the problems with soil fertility. The third one is to send children to school, so to pay for school fees. And here you see the other priorities. Investing the money in tree planting also came up. However, after ranking the priorities, it only came in on the 10th place, so the last priority in the top 10. And farmers told me, yes, tree planting is important, we see that it's good. However, we have so many other needs that it's not a priority for us. They are reluctant to invest their scarce resources in tree planting before some of these other more urgent needs have been met. So this suggests to me that poverty is a barrier to tree planting. However, the interesting thing is that planting trees can actually help meet some of these needs. Planting trees can help improve the fertility of the soil and increase the yields of maize, and it can further improve food security by giving fruits and nuts. The problem is, it takes a long time for trees to grow and to deliver these benefits. One of the farmers said this really beautifully in one of the group discussions. He said, for trees to mature, it takes a long time. 4 years is a very long time. You cannot wait for that when you are hungry. So, the truth of the story is that farmers in Malawi are interested in planting trees. In fact, a lot of them are planting trees currently. And planting these trees can help them meet some of their most urgent needs. So what we need to do now is find ways to support the Malawian farmers to plant more trees today to help them meet some of their needs tomorrow. Thank you.